Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the fourth and final session of the Back to Basics workshop, where we address the fundamentals of cleaning and FM. If you can hear and see both Tommy and me, please say that you can in the chat, so then I will continue immediately. You can just say yes in the chat. Thank you. So, as you all know, today is the fourth and final session of the workshop, where we have spent 3 other sessions talking about the fundamentals of cleaning and soft FM. As you know, this workshop is being organized by Clean Middle East magazine in association with Reza Hygiene. I'm just going to go over a little about the company before we continue. So Reza Hygiene, as you all may be knowing, is a one-stop provider of hygiene and cleaning solutions for all industries, especially the food chain, from farm to fork, healthcare, and commerce. Their solutions are wide-ranging, innovative, and sustainable, with the company taking a highly responsible approach to chemicals. Reza Hygiene also believes in the importance of empowering cleaning personnel with all the knowledge required to carry out cleaning practices efficiently. We at Clean Middle East magazine are 14 years old now. We've been responsible for disseminating information to the cleaning and hygiene market since its launch in 2008. And I'm Shanti Petiwala, the editor of Clean Middle East magazine. Before we begin, here are some of the rules of the workshop. As you all know, the workshop encompassed 4 sessions spread over 2 months. We are on the fourth session today, and this will go on for 2 hours along with the question and answer. All the attendees who have participated in all 4 sessions will be given a participation certificate. You will see a panel to the right where you're entering information into the chat. You will also see a questions tab. We will request you to put in your questions over there so that they don't get lost in the chat, and I will take these up during the Q&A session. At any point during the session, we may also call you on stage to interact with Tommy. If you're interested, just ensure that you're not on a firewall, so then it's just easier to get you on board. So take this opportunity to learn and absorb and refresh your memory on various aspects of cleaning and FM services. And finally, let me introduce you to our presenter for the Back to Basics workshop. Tommy Taylor, as you all know, is the director at T-Taylor Solutions in the UK. He is an accredited ISSA CIMS and ISSA CIE facilitator. Tommy has had extensive experience training, cleaning, and FM companies in the Middle East and continues to raise standards in cleaning through his own company in the UK called T-Taylor Solutions. Tommy has been an integral part of the Clean Middle East family since the last couple of years, and it is our honor to have him conduct this workshop and impart his knowledge and experience to you all across the 4 sessions. So without further ado, and for the final time, I hand over the presentation to Tommy. All the best. Tommy, over to you.
Thank you, Shanti. Good afternoon, all. I'd like to welcome you for this last session of 4. And I hope you've all had a good week. I know it's or 2 week and a half. It's slightly shorter. This is a slight odd one because now we're featuring on a Monday rather than the usual Wednesdays that we've had. So just going to run through the basics really in terms of where we are for those of you that are not familiar, not been with us before. So this session will last about 2 hours. We have various topics to get through in them 2 hours. During the 2 hours, I would like to, get you involved. You can ask any questions, which Shanti will then forward over to me. She would read out your questions to me. I would like to and very much appreciate if you can try and keep the questions as close to the subject matter that we're working on at the moment. And there will be ample opportunity at the end, because what I'm going to try and do is devote the last 15 minutes at the end for you to ask any questions about the 4 sessions that we've done prior to today. So as we go on, so every attempt, and the disclaimer here that we put down that I put for all my sessions, so every attempt has been made to make it generic in terms of what's been said and the topics that we're using. In no way does the topic guarantee you any success in a particular field or any particular part of the cleaning field. However, the information that we're giving you is really just a broad-based information which will hopefully give you an understanding of certain subjects and certain topics. Again, from the 3 previous sessions, that you pick and choose what topics you feel are relevant for you. Although I know some of you have been with me for all 4 sessions, and I would Wouldn't hasten to say that you're probably with me because one's for your own personal gain, so you get your certificate of attendance, which is fine. So some of you may have been following me and are interested in what others have to say, which I think is also fine, which is a good thing to do. What we need to do is be able to share information between us within the industry to make the industry grow and make the industry better. So next slide, please, Shanti. Okay. So we got a few subjects we're going to look at today. Some of the things you may know, something you may understand, some you don't understand. Again, whereon if you think there's a question that's relevant to the topic headings, then fine, please, join me and come in and sort of ask me any questions. However, before I go into this particular slide, I want to know from those of you that were with me last session and the session before, is there anything particular from the last session that you didn't have a chance to ask a question or address during that last session? We talked about understanding chemicals, understanding the types of chemicals in terms of detergents, sanitizers, disinfectants, and probiotics. And just to add a little bit of flavor to the probiotics session, a colleague of mine called Joe Flanagan, he has done a podcast with Clean Asia to talk about probiotics, and you'll probably find it interesting to go and have a listen to what he says. Very experienced guy, knows what he's talking about when it comes to probiotics and air quality. So it may be a session that you might want to join in and have a look and see, if there's anything there for you. We also talked about types of equipment that we use within the clean industry. We also looked and took a touch on terms of robotics within the industry and where it stands and what it does and what it doesn't do. So there's some of the topics that we had before. So are there any questions that related to the last session that you want clearing up, that you're not sure about, or has anything come about since the last time that we all spoke? Please post them to Shanti and we'll go from there.
Yes, guys, you all can put up the questions in the question tab. And in the meanwhile, we'll also put up a link to the podcast on the chat so you all can go through that as well.
Okay, good. Okay, so today we're going to start off now. We're going to start off with contracts. Now, some of you may be of the grade or level within your organization to deal with contracts. Some of you may not. Some of you may be independents looking to start up your own cleaning contracts, etc., etc. So what we're going to just look at is just a few basic elements within the contracting realm. Now, as probably some of you know, all contracts are different in terms of their content, what the client requires, from you, what the client will deliver from their end, giving standards, and there'll be details in that specification in terms of the time span of the contract, get out clauses if there's any, or anything of that particular nature. However, it's always important with any contract, and I know that today for some of you, and if you're like me, I get terribly bored probably after reading the first page. When you read a contract, you need to make sure that it's read properly. And if you can't digest it all, get somebody else to read it for you, because I think it's very important, because there have been situations where people have been tied up into contracts, signed for something they're not quite sure about, only to find out that there's going to be penalty clauses, and then penalty clauses can be considerably more than the actual contract value itself. So it's important to make sure that you understand the feel of the contract, how long the contract is. Is there a get out clause, i.e. if you fail to sort of fulfill that part of the contract, what's it going to cost you, if anything? What's it going to cost the client, if anything? So there's various things that needs to be done. So I firmly believe that with either yourself or somebody within your organization should have a handle on the actual content of a particular contract. So what we're going to look at for just a few basic elements, really. So what are KPIs? So key performance indicators. So what you will find is that within most contracts, there are KPIs that will help you and help your client measure how that contract is going or how they want it to go. And there's various elements that we'd like to put in. So Shanti, if you could put the first slide for me, please. The first handout.
Yes, Tommy, hold on one second.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, So I've got one here. This one is, oh, Shan, can you give me another one? That's the wrong one, please.
Okay, sorry. Can you
No,
tell me which one it is
put
exactly?
the client one, please. The client KPI.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, that's it. Thank you. Okay, so again, this is only an example. This is not definitive in its content. You will find that they will range from organization to organization. So, make sure that you're familiar. And what we will do once we've finished this particular slide or this particular area, we'll move on and we'll look at what the operatives KPIs will be. So what we got here is that, actually this is the clean operatives KPIs here. So what we've got here is just various standards that we're looking for in terms of our staff. Now, for a lot of our operational staff, it's not a popular thing to go down the road of doing an appraisal with them. It's quite difficult. It's very time consuming in trying to get them all together at particular times. And then again, you've possibly got a language barrier. You've probably got an educational barrier in terms of understanding. However, you have as managers, supervisors, senior managers, you've got levels that you have to achieve in order for your bosses or for your clients. So what we've got here is just a few examples of what a KPI would look like for your clean operative. So for some of you, or for those of you that are involved in this particular area, as I said, this is not definitive. So you may look at it and think, well, this does not relate to us. Probably it doesn't. So what you've got is attendance. So how do you judge their attendance? Do you judge their sick levels? Do you judge the time that they arrive for work, the time they go home, etc., etc.? Now, these are very measurable points. And what you're looking for when you're in a KPI is something that's measurable, something that you can confine between 2 points, not something that's open-ended. If it's open-ended, it's not measurable in the true sense of the word. So what we've got, clean attendance. So do they attend? Do they attend on time? What is their sickness levels? Then that's all measurable in terms of what you're looking at for your clean operative. And what do you do? What do you do if you find that it's not, if your expectations of their attendance, it hasn't been reached? How do you deal with it? Do you talk to them as a one-to-one? Do you fire them? In certain cases, it's not probably advisable. It should be done on a negotiation basis. But in order for this to work, they have to understand what their KPIs are. There's no point you having this in a folder and then you turn up and you say, well, your attendance is not very good and we're going to have to do this. Well, it has to be part of a negotiation process. What about time off site? So they spend regular time off site. So if you've got a large site, for instance, like a sports complex or something like that, do they spend time on site? Do they disappear? Do they go off in the corner? Do they have a cup of tea in the corner and having drinks and stuff? Are they not fulfilling what their contractual obligations is, which is generally just to clean or to keep tidy, etc., etc.? Is it task performance? So what about tasks that they do? So again, you can't measure this like for like because different people are doing different tasks within an organization, which it makes it very, very difficult. However, if you've got a particular floor person who's delivering and he or she, their job is to scrub floors, polish floors, burnish floors, the case may be, how do you measure their performance? Do you tell them at the end? Do you tell them when you're not happy with something? Or is it a gradual process where you're talking to them, you're educating them, you're training them, and to get them to a particular level? So when you're doing something that's task performance, you need to understand, you need to tell them what the scope of work is. What do you expect from them? Is it supposed to be done on a particular day? Is it supposed to be done on a particular time? Yeah, so there's all measurables there in terms of what they do and what they don't do. I touched on it briefly in terms of absenteeism. So are they absent a lot? Are they, very poorly? Do they get very sick very often? Do they just go off because they've got a runny nose or anything of that nature? And again, we have to take it into the context of where we are at the moment. Clearly the situation we are with COVID, etc., it's hard to measure this at the moment in terms of absenteeism, because as most of you probably know, there are boundaries in terms of what's expected from a person when they're on site, what their condition should be when they're on site, if they're showing any signs at all of having COVID, i.e., runny nose, etc., high temperature. they can't be penalised for that. That's not fair. That's not fair to penalise them and say, well, you've had 2 weeks off. We're not happy with your performance because. So given the situation that we're in at the moment in terms of the world, the world situation, not just in the Middle East or the Far East, etc., and this is happening everywhere, absenteeism should be measured very, very carefully and should be managed very, very carefully. So what's the quality of their work like? So do you judge the quality of work based on your site audits? Do you judge the quality on their work on the fact that users walking around and having a look? Do you judge it on the fact that the client may walk around and raise a complaint? How do you deal with that? So for instance, if the client's walking around and they're just doing their daily walk and they see something that's wrong and they mention it to you, then you mention it to your cleaning operative, you take it out on your cleaning operative. In some respects, that I can understand, it's not the right thing to do. However, it has to be taken into context. It has to be taken into context when the item was last cleaned. It has to be taken into context the traffic flow, in terms of how many people are using that particular location. Is it susceptible to getting dirty very quickly? Has it been raining outside? Have you had a sandstorm, etc., etc.? So there's various things you need to look at when it comes to quality at work. Now, as it states here, it says, are you looking at taking the quality of their work based on your monthly audits and your inspection scores? Are you actually going to pinpoint one person if something doesn't go right? Now, that may be the case, but again, that is a KPI that you can measure, but it's also key that everybody knows what the boundaries are in terms of doing that. So, are they learning from their mistakes? So it doesn't matter, well, it does matter really how many times you tell somebody to do something, but are they learning from their mistakes? Do they understand what the mistakes that they've made? Have you communicated with that to them that properly? So we went back a few weeks ago when we talked about communication. So communication is very key in terms of what we do, how we communicate. Do we shout at our staff? Do we negotiate with them? Do we talk to them softly? Do we sort of explain to them? Do we take them and show them what we want done? There's various ways of communicating with our staff. And as we know, and again, I have to point this out, and this is not a personal thing. As we know, most of our cleaning operatives at a low level, their education is not what we would probably expect for ourselves or anybody else. So their understanding of things may not be the same. It may take you 2 or 3 goes to get across your message. It may take you 2 or 3 goes to sort of get them to actually sort of understand what it is you're trying to say and do that. So part of the best way to communicate, and I've found with most of the operational staff, is hands-on. Either get someone to demonstrate and show them what you want done, or you show them yourself what you want done. If it's verbal, 9 times out of 10, or even 10 out of 10, your operative will say, yes sir, yeah, I understand, but they don't actually understand. What they're doing is they're being polite. They realize that they're very limited in terms of that two-way conversation that they may have with you. Then, if they come back to you and say, well, but sir, you think they're talking back to you, which is not always the case. The case is that your operative has a voice. He or she may have an opinion about what's happened, so you need to tease it out of them. So I would say, and I will stick with it, that a lot of the time, if you show them what needs to be done, that gives you much more leverage than if you just saying it to them verbally. So again, training, I come back to this all the time, and for me, training is very, very key. It's important that the staff understand what training means, how it fits into their work role. Are you rewarding them for participating in training courses, or it's just something they should be doing? However, again, training, they should engage regularly with training. You should have a regular training program. It doesn't have to be a structured program in terms of a BICS program or ISSA or anything of that nature. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be just a total, it could be in-house. It can be a toolbox talk where they get opportunities to ask questions. Again, it may be something where you just show them what to do and you get them to demonstrate what needs to be done, just under normal conditions, not under assessment conditions. So training is a key when it comes to that, and looking at the KPI. Did they get involved in the training? What are they like when they're in the training? Do they just sit there and listen to you? Do they actually get on and do it? Do they understand what needs to be done? What about initiatives? So there's been times I can't speak for your region, there's been times in the UK where companies here give out incentives and for people who show initiative, because what we have to understand a lot of the time is that our clean operatives are the ones that are on the ground level. They're the ones that are doing the work every day. They see the pitfalls, they see the problems that you may have, and sometimes they may have a good idea to solve that problem. So if they've got a good idea, what do? Do you keep it for yourself? Do you run and tell your manager how good you are because you come up with a suggestion knowing it's somebody else's, or do you reward them? Do you reward them for showing a bit of initiative and showing a bit of change? Do you know, have they done something, above and beyond the call of duty, as they say, the ABCD? Have they done something that's enhanced your delivery of that particular contract in some shape or form? So there's various ways and means that you can actually set KPIs for your operational staff, which will benefit you as an organization, will benefit them as an individual. However, remember, as I said, they should be measurable. If you remember the old scale, the SMART scale, it has to be, it has to be a time on it, has to be boundaries, where it starts and where it finishes. If it's open-ended, it's not going to work. So look at your KPIs, look at what you do for your operatives or don't do for your operatives or your managers, your supervisors, see if they're achievable, see if you've got things in there, you're giving them incentives to achieve something. One of the companies that I work with here, they're very, very proactive on ensuring that the staff use their chemicals correctly and they use them efficiently. So contracts will they start off with a particular cost, and contracts will get a cost sheet for that particular site. And where they save without compromising quality, where they save on chemicals, there's an incentive at the end of the year that they get a bonus and they share between them. And that's a good thing. Sometimes it's good to tell them, but what you don't want them to do is run out there and just use water because they're trying to save everything. But they're not that silly. They understand the fundamentals of what it is. And again, going back to training and what we said last week, if you're using things like dispensers and things like that, that saves you time, it saves you money, and it brings an initiative to the staff. Next slide, please, Shanti. Next handout.
Okay, the next handout. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, you've got one for the client. Have you got the client one, the client KPI?
Yes, we have. 1 second. This is the one, right?
No, that's the specification.
Do you want to go back to the PPT? Because we just received these 3 documents from you.
All right. All right. Okay. I thought there should have been another one. Okay, no problem. Let me call it up and I can read from it and I can share it with everybody later on.
Maybe if you can send it to me right now on WhatsApp, I'll get it done. It may take 5 minutes, but it'll happen.
Okay, no problem. Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry,
everybody.
This is my fault.
Oh no.
I'm struggling to find it now, Shanti. You need to give me time.
No worries.
Yeah. I'm struggling to find it now because I don't know where it is. So hang on. Let me. Specification. No. Okay. I'll come back to you later on because I've got it here later on.
No problem.
All right. So if I continue, folks, I'll continue in terms of where I am. What my understanding is. So what you've got, what we just demonstrated there are KPIs which you for your cleaning staff. So what about KPIs that I use for your clients and your clients have introduced in terms of KPIs? So one of the things that I was talking about just now is audit scores. So if you're doing audits or anything of that nature, what about the scores on the audits? If the audits are what the client is perceived to be good, then then you've hit a particular KPI target, for instance. So there's various things that we need to look at in terms of that, in terms of what the client wants in terms of KPI. So again, there could be uses of chemicals. Again, initiatives that you can bring to your client in terms of saving money and making their building better. They may want a KPI in terms of cost savings. So what sort of cost savings are you going to have, and what you're going to introduce during the life of the contract? Now, again, that will take on, for instance, a different feel depending on the particular contract and your client's, how do I say, your relationship with your client. What's the next slide, please, Shanti, please? Again, next one. Okay, so when it comes to setting, and I'm just going back, sorry, to clean up with this. So when it comes to setting KPIs for your operational staff, decide on how many you're going to have. Don't make it too large. If you make the whole range too large, it becomes silly, and it doesn't really become, it's not meaningful anymore. So decide in between, like as it says here on the slide, between 3 to 7. Okay, and that should be a really reasonable range. Try to make sure that your KPIs are reasonable, and make sure that they're achievable, and make sure they're understood. Again, there's no point having a KPI that you roll out at the end of the year and say to somebody, well, you've not achieved your KPI and you've not actually spoken to them about it. So one of the things that you need to make sure is that they're understood, and they're kept simple, and they're not complicated in any way, because then it just waters down the fact that you've actually sort of got it, and it's not actually being used in the proper manner. Okay, and last but not least, so make them achievable. And it says here aspirational, in the sense that sometimes people thrive from having that competition. People thrive from knowing that they've hit a target. People thrive to know that they've actually achieved something that their bosses want, and it meets the company's needs, and it meets their needs in terms of individuals. So make it aspirational. If there's an incentive to be had from it, whether it be a gift voucher or a free meal or whatever the case may be, put it in, but don't compromise the contract. What you should try to do is not put in measures where people are deliberately cutting corners to get it achieved. If you're doing that, you're putting yourself at risk. You're compromising the contract, and in certain cases, you may be compromising health and safety. Next slide, please, Shanti. Okay, so these are the client KPIs that I was alluding to. So what are we looking at? We've got 6 basic ones, and again, once I've finished this slide, I would like from the audience, if you can just give me some examples of ones that you've had that may not be on this particular slide. So you've got quality of service. So as I said to you, the quality of service can be measured, and it needs to be measured, because we know that cleaning is very subjective. Okay, so if there was 10 of us all standing in a row and we looked at the same surface, we'd all come up with different reasons why it's probably not clean. So we need to be able to make sure that our quality of service is measured. So have you got performance KPIs that you measure by? Is something clean or isn't it clean? There's no real in between. Well, are you in between clean? So something's either clean or it's dirty, depending on when it's done. So you're looking at the quality of service. You're looking at quality of service from your operational staff. You're looking at quality of service from your supervisory staff and your management team. Now that could come in the ways of client satisfaction, customer service. If you're working in a shopping mall, how they get on with the clients in the shopping mall. Are they able to give directions and anything of that nature? Client satisfaction. So by and large, it's very, very difficult sometimes to satisfy your client, especially in this particular climate that we've got at the moment. Remember, cleaning is a difficult area in terms of understanding and achievement. So as I said to you, what your client sees isn't necessarily what you see. If your client sees a piece of paper on the floor at 9 o'clock and the floors have just been cleaned at sort of 10 to 9, well, your client sees that as failing. They're not happy. That's not part of their satisfaction. And to respect, you can understand that. However, you need to negotiate and make sure that you understand what it is that they want. whether it's achievable in terms of what they want. Again, if there's room and scope for negotiation, that's fine. But there needs to be a compromise in terms of where you are, what their expectations are from you, and what your expectations are from them. Again, operative performances, again, that will come up as part of the client's KPIs. So, you know, are they performing properly? Are they dressed in the right manner? Do they help out? Do they help out the clients in terms of, as I said, you know, simple things like giving directions to where a location may be in a particular building? Again, this may be difficult, may be hard to achieve if the person doesn't speak the same language as the person that's trying to communicate with them in the first place. So there's difficulties that arise from that particular scenario. Does your operative work within the confines and boundaries that you set for them? Do they put out their warning signs? Is their equipment clean? Is their cleaning store clean? Again, you know, have they been trained to a particular level? Because remember, in certain cases, your clients could be paying for that training. They want to know, has it been achieved? Do they do? Can they do? What about safety aspects? So you've got the safety aspects of running the contract, as we touched on a couple of weeks ago, in terms of health and safety, making sure that your risk assessments are all up to date, making sure your method statements are up to date and they're actually achievable. So these are the sort of things that your clients will be looking for. What about financial? Well, if you can show me or tell me a client that doesn't want you to save money, then, you know, I'm in the wrong game. However, you know, there are financials that the client may want. They may want savings on things. They may want you to give them a cost to do something extra, but they're looking for the best price, the best cost all the time. So where there's a financial in terms of the KPI, they may have a financial limit that needs to, can't be exceeded at the end of the month. And these are the sort of things you need to look at in terms of financial. And I would probably say, of all the 6 things that are there, the financial bit is probably the first thing that comes to your client's mind. If you can save them money in some shape or form, that's what you do. What about health? What about sustainability? Now, if you're part of the client's profile in terms of the environment and sustainability, and in terms of where we are at the moment, again, I keep touching on it, but you know, we can't get away from it. In terms of where we are with COVID, how is it managed? You know, do you manage your staff correctly? Do you make sure that if your staff have any particular symptoms that they're off site very correctly? What's the procedure for alerting your client to the fact that, you know, one or more of your staff may have got COVID or something of that nature? So there's various things that we need to do now in terms of looking at health and sustainability in that particular area. You know, the landscape has changed. As we know from last year, this time last year, the landscape has changed enormously when it comes to this kind of stuff. This is not a situation now where people turn up for work and they're coughing and they're sneezing and it's okay. You put them in the corner and they're wiping their nose with tissue. It's not like that no more. Things have to change. So you have to have methods. You have to have a program in place to make sure that you're meeting your client's KPIs. Part of your simple client KPI will be that if one of your staff shows symptoms of having COVID, then they are not allowed on site. That is it, period, finish. There's no negotiation at all. So, as I said, these are 6 of the basic ones that we've got here. Again, if you've got them, fine. If you haven't got them, that's also fine. So I'll be interested to know. So I'm going to open the floor now, just to give myself an extra 20-second wind and have a sip of tea. Is there anything in terms of KPIs that I've said here or not said that you're not familiar with? And can somebody give me an example of a KPI that they've got within their contract that is not listed on this sheet now?
Thank you, Tommy. We'll wait for maybe half a minute for people to send in their questions.
Sure, no problem. No problem.
Yeah. People, please bring on your questions. Your last chance to ask Tommy anything face to face, at least on this forum. So we'll hold on. Till then, Tommy, maybe you can source that pullout that you want us to put up.
Yeah, so that's okay. Don't worry. I think I've covered it here. Actually, I think it was my fault. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. You've covered it, then it's fine.
Yeah. I think it's my fault. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So I think while we're getting the questions on,
Sure.
I found it very interesting when you spoke about initiative in one of your slides. You
Uh-huh.
talk about you kind of expect cleaning operators to be quiet and just go about their job, but they are the ones who are on the floor. I remember this from an interview some time ago, where people, the person who we were interviewing was talking about how they are the people on the floor. They are the ones who are seeing what is happening.
Yeah,
They're the ones who are actually doing the job, so they know what can be done to make it better, more efficient. So
correct.
I think initiative taking is something that operators and their supervisors really need to take into consideration.
Yeah, I think that the thing is that um, we are in a strange world when it comes to cleaning, in the
Mm,
sense that each level of the organization um, has a firm believing that they know more than the people below them, which in most cases
mm,
is the case. And the point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes the operational staff actually have good ideas about how things can change to make them more efficient, but they are either frightened to say because the manager will shut them down or don't give them the opportunity to say it, or in their own minds they're not confident enough to say it. And it can be just a very, very simple change that will make their lives different. Now,
exactly.
culturally, it's a hard thing to get across because a lot of operational staff, as I say, basically what they want to do, they want to turn up in the morning, they want to do their work, they want to make sure that their manager doesn't shout at them, and that's okay, then that's fine, off they go. However, as I said, there's various times, there has been times in my life when operative has said, oh, if we use that, this might be better, or I've used this in the past and it was better. And if just give them a chance, to flourish and understand what's going on. Sometimes you might even find that's your next supervisor there because they actually understand, they want to move on, they understand what they've done in the past, which could now benefit them in the future. So to get their view sometimes is not wrong, for and it gives them a sense of feeling that they're part of the organization because somebody's listening to them. Their actual their suggestion may not be appropriate in that particular moment in time, but one of the things is to give them a voice to be able to express themselves, because I say they'll come out sometimes with a good idea that nobody else has ever thought of because they're doing the same job every day.
Absolutely. In fact, a couple of years ago, we used to have, I don't know if you remember, but we used to have this awards called the Excellence Awards, where,
Yeah.
that was associated with our show, which
Mhm.
is now no more with us. But, that is where we actually had people. So we were awarding the cleaning attendants and the cleaning supervisors
Uh-huh.
in hotels as well as FM companies, for the work that they were doing. And there were certain instances where you had innovations that were created, like softwares or certain processes that were created on their suggestion.
Yeah.
So that is something that is very heartening to see. If a person at a managerial level can actually allow them to speak up, there's so much more that we can learn from them.
Yeah, I think that, and well, some of you may notice what I'm about to say, and some of you will be in denial. But the sometimes the higher up the organisation you get, the bigger your ego, and as a consequence, you fail to listen to what people below you are saying,
Mm,
because they are traditionally they're looking to you for suggestions because you're the manager. So they sometimes hold back because they think, oh, if I say, they think, oh, Mr. Tommy will think I'm saying this because, I'm trying to undermine him. But you're not undermining me. What you're trying to do is to make sure that, that things are done in a different way. So yeah, there's a big mindset that needs to take place in terms of some of our senior managers, just letting their guard down for a little bit and let people talk, let them express themselves. As I say, they may have perfectly good suggestions that we would never ever have thought up about.
absolutely. So we have a couple of questions, Tommy, and a couple of comments. So
Yeah.
Michael Williamson talks about two things. He says that KPIs are something that is often confused between the client and the contractor.
Okay.
Um, And he also says that many cleaning contracts in the Middle East are manpower supply based rather than performance based.
Okay.
So maybe if we could just touch upon the concept of manpower based contracts, what are these kind of contracts, and should they actually be taken into consideration at all?
Okay, so I'm hoping I've got the right handle here when I say manpower basis is obviously how many people it's going to take to do a particular job rather
Yes,
than yeah.
that's what I
Okay.
understood.
Okay. So so what I can say to Michael, one of the things that I can say is that what he's actually described is two clearly defined boundaries until things go wrong. um, if in the Middle East, etc., there's a very high dependency on staff. Hence, as I said last week, in terms of robotics has its place, but it's very limited, especially where you're working in a culture where it's labor intensive. Now, yes, you may have the labor, but again, does it work? Have you, have they been properly trained? Are they properly presented? Do they know what they're doing at the right time in the right place? So, that may be the case in terms of that. What was the second part of his question, please, Shanti?
So this was the second part, that he was just commenting that cleaning contracts in the Middle East are more manpower based than performance. But initially he spoke about how KPIs are something that is often confused between the client and the contractor.
Okay, so I think that I say, if I go back and I lost the one word which is crucial there, which is performance based. Now, and Michael, I don't think I've got this wrong, but I'm quite happy for you to tell me. It doesn't really matter how many members of staff you've got on site, whether you've got 15, 20, 100. If they're not performing to the right level, if they're not delivering the job as the way the client expects and the way you expect, it doesn't really matter what the manpower is. So, there's always going to be an element of performance-based management within that, a performance-based KPI. So your performance-based KPI, as I said, can be picked up via your audit. It can be picked up on a day-to-day basis in terms of just the general standards that are seen throughout the site. And it doesn't really matter how many people you've got on site. If you've got 10 people on site and they're still not performing properly, you're still not getting anything done, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, when it comes down to a KPI, it's really, really about the performance, because with experience, and hopefully, Michael, you understand what I'm saying, with experience, you can get the same performance, the same depth or quality of work from 5 people as you'll get from 10. If you've got 10 people, sometimes you find that it's just not working, because if people are not pulling their weight, if people don't understand what needs to be done, it doesn't really matter how many members of staff you got. So if you're asking me for my opinion of them two things, them two qualities, the main qualities about the performance, because if you can't, if you don't have a measurement against the performance and how you get to that particular scope, then it's not going to work. It doesn't matter how many members of staff you've got.
Yeah, true. In fact, I was just going to ask a question which Michael has also commented upon. He spoke about, he says here they pay per head and just do what the client says. So standard really doesn't count. So how can a contractor really convince the client that it is a contract needs to be performance based without the risk of losing that contract?
I personally, based on the way the question is structured, I personally don't believe that, because at the end of the day, the client only wants a good performance and good quality. As I said, yes, when you tender for your contracts, you will say, I'm going to have 100 people on site. That's not a problem. But at the end of the day, if you've got 100 clean operatives on site and they're not performing the task that you want, they're not performing the quality of service that your client wants, it's not going to make any difference. Now, I know, and it doesn't only happen in your region, it happens here. I know that in certain contracts, there's an expectation that if you, as a cleaning contractor, said, I'm going to use, just for putting an example, 10 people to clean on a daily basis to do a particular task, and you only have 9 people turn up, then your client's going to want a reduction in cost to reflect only 9 instead of 10. However, we all have to understand is that the client still expects the same quality of service, whether it be 9 or 10. So the client always wins in that respect, because you know as a contractor your service cannot diminish because you've got one person less, but you also understand that if you've got one person less, your client's going to want a rebate based on that one person that's missing. That's the only way I can put it in simple terms. So on that basis, your client has always got the whip hand. The client is always in command when it comes to that particular KPI in terms of the quality. So the quality of service and the client satisfaction is very, very prominent in that, and also the financial aspect. So as I said, you know, if you've got 100 people on staff and they're not performing properly, and you've got 90 people on staff and they're performing to the optimum level and giving 100%, then there's going to have to be a compromise between, well, do I actually need them extra 10 people, or are you having to keep giving a rebate back to your client because you haven't got enough people?
I think it also goes down to comes down to communication from the management as well of your company as a contractor. Do you think that that would play a role? Like if you have open communication between, say, the top guy in your company and you say as a cleaning manager, would that help? Because you would be then in a position to tell them that, you know, we shouldn't be doing performance-based contracts. Would that help, Tommy?
Sometimes it will help, and again, it goes back to the fact that the client is paying for a particular service, and that's what he or she wants. Now, if you're able to negotiate at a very early stage the KPIs and boundaries that are involved within managing that contract, then that's fine. If you start the contract or you've won that contract based on the fact that you haven't actually done your research and there's been no negotiation, it's going to be very hard for you to go back to the client and say to them, well, you know, we need another 10 people to achieve the level that you want. They don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is that you're actually going to perform the tasks that you said you're going to perform when you're at the contracting stage. So it's a difficult thing to do, and I think there's, as I said, and I go back to it, there's a lot of egos involved when you do this. There's a lot of I'm the person paying the bill, so you do as I say.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of, well, I'm paying your wages, you do as I say. So there's a lot of ego that's involved, and how you break them barriers down, I don't know. And again, you know, I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not saying that all clients are the same. I'm not saying that all contractors are the same. I'm just giving just a broad outline of my experience, what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've had colleagues say to me in terms of doing. And again, if you're of an operational level, i.e. you haven't been involved in the contract negotiation, you don't know what it's all about. Sometimes what you're left with is the piece of paper that comes in and says, this is what we want you to do. You've not been involved in anything else before that. And sometimes there is a good rationale behind getting people involved in that process. They can understand how it works, and so they can give an input in terms of how it works. And, you know, if the sales team say, oh, well, yeah, we've given you 50 people and actually you actually need 60 people to do that job, how are you going to do it? Well, you know, you've got no choice but to do it. And you've got no choice but to fulfill the first heading that we've got on that one, which is quality of service. You have to deliver that service regardless if you've got 10, if you're 10 short or 15 short, your client expects that same quality of service. And it's an unwritten rule. It goes without saying.
Okay. Thanks, Tommy.
Okay.
We have Adil Bukhari asking us if you could give us some examples of KPIs in terms of cleaning and health and safety.
So there's cleaning, health and safety. So in terms of health and safety, one of the things that you're looking at is accident levels. So that could be measured as a KPI, what the accident levels are within a month or a particular year. I know that I've been to the UAE and around about the region, and you'll actually have, for instance, in terms of building contractors, they would actually put a board up saying we've had no near misses in the whole year, which is fine, no problem, great. So, you know, if I was to measure that, you need to measure in terms of the level of accidents that you've had. And again, there needs to be a level of honesty about what's going on, because You know, there's been cases where somebody's had a minor accident or an accident where they had to go to hospital and it's been covered up and it's not been recorded and it's not in the accident book or anything of that nature. So again, you know, in that respect, you're living a lie. So there's various things. So in terms of health and safety, what you're looking at is accident levels. You could be looking at training in health and safety. So what kind of training is relevant to people within health and safety sphere. You can be looking at simple things of walking around the site, seeing how many people are using their safety signs, how many people are using their PPE, etc., etc. So there's various things you can do in that particular level. In terms of cleaning itself, you're looking at the standard. So for those of you that know me, you know, I'm very hot on the journey, not the outcome. So I can put in front of you a clean glass and it looks clean and it's fine. There's no water spotting on it, or etc., etc. But who's to say that I haven't washed that glass? I haven't used any detergent. I've not used any hot water to rinse or help kill the bacteria. I've used dirty water to wash that glass. So it's about the journey. So in terms of setting KPIs for cleaning, you need to set outcomes. So is something clean or isn't it clean? That's basically how it should work. If you're going to use the third parameter, then you should ask, well, is it clean? What's the level expected between cleans? So if you're cleaning your toilet at 9 o'clock and you're not due to clean it again until 12 o'clock, what's the expected level of soilage you expect within them 3 hours? Because it will be unfair to penalise the operative or to penalise the company from a client's point of view if a manager or an agent for the client goes into a toilet at 10:30 and expects it to be as clean as it was at 9 o'clock. It's just not going to work. If you've got a static person in the toilet, it's slightly different. But if there's no static person, there's got to be some sort of reality between what's expected at 9 o'clock and what's expected at 12 o'clock if you've got a 3-hour window. Hope that answers his question.
Thanks, Tommy. Adil asks that, are there any standard guidelines adopted internationally?
Not internationally, no. There's localized. I'll try and pull this up before we start the next session. BICs have a very simple matrix that you could use in terms of doing that, and it's very, very easy to use. If you're going to use a quality matrix in terms of doing that, try not to make your range too wide. So for instance, you will see on some surveys that people ask you to judge something between 1 to 10. For me, in terms of cleaning, that's too wide a range, because, you know, what does 7 represent? What does 3 represent? To be perfectly frank, within our field, if it's clean, it's clean. If it's dirty, it's dirty. There's no levels. There's no, oh, well, this is level 7 dirt. Well, no, it can't be like that. It's either dirty or it's clean, one or the other. If, as I said, if there's an in-between, that's an in-between clean, i.e. it was clean this morning, it's not due to be cleaned this afternoon. This is the level we expect at a certain particular point in the day. So there's no international standards, even in the UK, within the 3 countries within the UK. There's various standards in terms of what we do, and I will put up, once we've had our break, I'll come back and we'll put up the stuff here for the NHS in the UK. So I hope I've asked his question. No, there's no international standards that I know of, but however, we had to remember that now we're all as nations striving for the same thing. So remember, we're cleaning for health now, not for aesthetics. That's what we're doing. We're cleaning to save lives now, not just to make something shiny.
Well said, Tommy. We also have a question from Rabi Gupta.
Yeah.
He says, sometimes we've observed KPIs on emergency and disaster management, and also there are KPIs related to quality of non-technical hand tools, machineries, equipment, and consumables. Or do we relate all these to the first bullet in the slide that says quality of services?
No, not really, because they're specifics, aren't they? What he's saying, what Rabi's saying. So they're particular specifics. So if based on what he's asking and what he's demonstrated, I would start off with that being internal. That's not a client KPI. So, you know, what are your KPIs within your own organization for your equipment? Do you expect to find your mop buckets clean when you go in? Do you expect that your mops don't smell? Do you expect that if somebody uses a rotary machine that it's clean at the end of the day, that the lead is intact, that it's got an up-to-date pat test on it? They're all the sort of things that you should be looking at internally before the client even looks at anything else. Now, I've always said, and I've always maintained, that if I'm doing a cleaning audit, the first place I would audit is always the cleaner's cupboard or the cleaner's room, because you get a feel of what your contract's like just looking at that room. Because if they can't keep their equipment clean, how are they going to keep your building clean sufficiently? So in terms of what he's asking, I can see some of the things he's asking here. I think that a lot of them things are not necessarily a client KPI. First of all, they're actually an internal KPI in terms of looking at the machines, the equipment, the consumables. So how much do they use? So if you've got a proper program of assessing how many consumables you're using within a particular period, that will give you a KPI standard. You know, if you're using, just for argument's sake, you know, 4 cases of neutral detergent within a month, when you know that really you can get by with 3, you know, you need to set KPIs, but you also need to find out why they're using more. Is it because they're not trained properly? Is it because they're not dispensing it properly? Do they understand how to use it? There's lots of variables in terms of doing that. So in terms of the other part, he said emergency and disaster management. I'm not really quite sure. So Ravi, if you can just sort of just expand that one for me, please, while we have the break, and I'll come back and I'll try and answer the question. But I hope I've answered the question in the other areas. So, you know, just to round it up, it's not really, although it can be part of your client's KPIs, it should be part of your organization's KPIs, to be perfectly frank, in terms of doing that.
Great. Thank you so much, Tommy.
Okay.
He gives an example of cleaning after fire on site.
Right. Okay. So, so if there's been a fire on site, so what you should have, excuse me, and if somebody wants to correct me if I'm just speaking off the cuff here. So if there's been a disaster in that respect of fire or flood, etc., there is an expectation. So there's an expectation of what the place should look like after that particular scenario. So if there's been a fire, then there should be an agreement between yourself and the client as to what level you need to get it clean before you sort of fall outside that boundary. So for instance, if you've got smoke and fire damage, well, it's highly likely that after a fire there's has to be some form of redecoration or of that nature. So what you need to be looking at is what level does my client expect me to sort of achieve before that surface is redecorated or painted again, and that has to be through negotiations. Of course, if it's a situation where the fire was this weekend and you know you've got a leading time, you know you can't do everything at once. If the building's not inhabitable after a fire, then there's a different scenario. But if it is, then there should be an agreed level. So there's an agreed level of how much smoke damage is it going to be, because sometimes you can't get rid of it all, regardless of what you do. You have to wash it down and repaint it or resurface it, or the case may be. So there has to be negotiation within that, Ravi. That's all I can say to you. If, for instance, there was flood damage, for instance, again, there has to be some level. So it may be your responsibility as an organization to remove all the water. It may be part of your responsibility to dry out any furnishings, any carpets, etc., etc. But what you cannot do, you cannot guarantee anything. You can't guarantee there's not going to be a smell after it because of water damage. You can't guarantee that anything that's been damaged by water is going to be solved by just cleaning it. It's just not going to work. So I think that in terms of that, and I hope I've asked this question, that needs to be negotiated in terms of what is the perceived level that you need to be able to achieve. And if the client is unrealistic about what he or she wants, then it's down to you as an organization to sort of coax them into the right direction.
Great. Thank you so much, Tommy. Rabi also thanks you. He says, yes, there has to be defined levels. So I think we'll take a break now and we'll be
Sure.
back in 10 minutes.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Hi, welcome back, everybody. Couple of things. We are going to set up two polls in the tab that says polls, where we're going to be asking you all about how satisfied you are with the workshop and how whether you want similar workshops in the future as well. So please do click on the polls. It will be reflecting on that tab in some time. In the meanwhile, Tommy, I think we can continue.
Can hear you. Your line's fading a bit, Shanti. Okay.
Sorry?
Your line was going in and out. I didn't hear you what you said.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm going to repeat myself. I think I forgot my headset. Okay, so what I'm saying is that welcome back, everyone. And we're going to be putting up two polls on the poll tab right now. We're going to be asking everybody about number one, how satisfied you were with the content and the concept of this workshop. So there are just two options, yes or no. And the second one is on whether you want similar workshops in the future. So you can take your time. Poll is up till the end of the session. So you can take your time and say yes or no on either or both of these polls. And Tommy, we can continue.
Okay. So
Shall I put up the document?
yeah, put up the one I just sent you. Okay. So excuse me. So some of you are asking prior to us having a break, and welcome back. So what we've got here is an example. So this is an example from VIX, those you are familiar. And what you've got here in the color tabs at the top are a specification, and in some respects you can use as a KPI, but it's got acceptable on clean of task, and then acceptable in between, which is the amber, and then red, which is unacceptable. Now, within the realms of when I've always worked on this premise, because as I said, you can't have a degree on cleaning. It's either clean or it's not clean. If you've got one speck of dust, you don't give it 1 point, and if it's got 10 specks, you give it 10 points. It doesn't work that way. At the end of the day, we're all expecting to be clean or not clean. So basically, this is, and this is out there. This is, I know it says it's copywritten. I'm not using it in the true sense of its word. I'm just giving it as an example. And what you've got on down your left-hand side are the general broad outline, which says general, hard floors, soft floors, vertical surfaces, furniture fixings, and sanitary fixings. Now, the one thing that I should say to you, again, which I think I said before, is try to make them achievable. Don't try to catch out your staff. There's no point. Try to make them achievable, and there's something they can do based on the training you've given them, the equipment they've got, and the time and the amount of traffic they have to deal with during the day. So this is a basic example. As I said, you can find it on the internet if you want. I can't necessarily give you a copy because it says bound by copyright and it's not mine to give. But it's out there in the ether if you want to use it. So if we go in addition to that, you got the next sheet there, Shanti, please. Okay, so in the addition to that, what we've got here is an example of specification, and once we've finished this particular sheet, Shanti will put up another example of a specification for me. So what you've got here in this specification is an office and a washroom. So what it's telling you, without any great detail, it's telling you what the task that needs to be done. So the first one would be remove waste, damp wipe and wash waste receptacles, and it's got soft floors, spot suction clean, full suction clean, etc. Then in the next column, you've got the frequency. Now, this is not as I said, this is very simple in terms of its format. It doesn't tell you anything about the time it should be done, whether it's day, night, should be done between hours, etc. This is basically just saying to you that in this particular case, one task can be done 5 days per week, another task will be done once per week, etc., etc. So very simple format to run if you're looking to do something of this particular nature. In certain cases, if you're going to tender for or bid for a contract, sometimes it's good to have this kind of information if the client hasn't given it to you. So if the client hasn't given it to you, technically you're bordering into the realms of having what we call an outward specification. So an outward specification is a specification where you, the contractor, are telling the client what you can do to get his or her building clean, as opposed to an inward spec where the client is giving you a set of boundaries and saying, this is what we want clean and this is the outcome that we want. Okay, and in certain cases they may even tell you when to do it, but that's down to you. So what you've got here on this particular specification, as say again, this is only a template format. If you want to do your own format, then fine. I do believe, although I say I'm not here to plug BICS or anybody else, I do believe that that ISSA have a set of formats in terms of this. BICS have a set of formats that you could probably purchase from if you're a BICS member. So what you've got at the top is the content. So it tells you where it is in this particular case, an office, washroom, stairs, etc., etc. And the criteria it's telling you: average use, working area, medium density, i.e. in terms of furniture and traffic, 5 days per week usage. So again, you need to define what your 5 days are. In your region, you know, your 5 days could be from Sunday to Wednesday. Here in Europe, it's on Monday to Friday, etc., etc. And the core working hours. So the core working hours could be from 9 to 5. It could be from, you know, midday to whatever. But whatever the core working areas is, the core working hours is really based on the time, the density of people within that building. So if most people work between 9 to 5, well, that's your core hours. Anything inside, anything outside of that hours is unsociable. Okay, and it's then outlines is saying for internal cleaning only. So if you've got something for external, for car parks, for driveways, for pavements, then they're going to be slightly different. So you need to write them in a different manner. Okay, so that's just giving you a basic outline in terms of a standard specification. Shanti, if you can put up the next spec for me, please.
Would you like me to go back to the PPT or the document that you sent across?
The one that's sent across, the one that the cleanest spec that's on the landscape.
Yes. Okay. Give me half a minute, Tommy.
Okay, no problem, no problem. In the meantime, while Shanti's doing that, do you want to post any questions related to what I've said on this particular specification sheet? As I said, it's out there in the ether. As I said, you know, I hasten to say it's bound by copyright, so I'm not giving it to you. You know, I'm going to give it to you as an example, not as be all and end all. The other document, Shanti, the clean inspect, the landscape one. It's about 3-4 pages.
No, I know. 1 second, please.
Yeah, sure. That's it. Okay, so folks, so this is something I've used for one of my clients. It's a little bit more complex than the one that I've shown you in terms of its usage, but it has its place. So what we've got here on this particular sheet is giving you, and the client can see this at a glance, it's giving you the name of the operative. So the reason why we've taken the name out is because in certain situations we're bound by data protection. So what we tended to use is just the operative, we just use in 1, 2, 3, or we use their payroll number. So we don't identify them by name. Then you have in the second column, you have a shift pattern. So they are day operative, they even operative, they are janitor. Then you've got the total hours that they work per day, which in this particular case is 7. They work from 8:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. Next page, please. Okay, so what we've got here is just an example again. So what you've got is in this you've got the scope of work, which is down your left-hand side. And across the top, you've got the times that it should be done and by whom. So in this particular case, this contract is on this particular situation is Monday to Saturday. Saturdays they work from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. So it's only a 2-hour shift on a Saturday. And then with the final column, we've got periodic. And again, this is not hard and fast. This is an example. So you may want to use this as part of your example, or you've got something else already. That's fine. It's not a problem. So just remember, it's just an example. So what you've got at the top, as I said, is Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday in this particular case, is giving you the times of the shift times. So in this particular case, it's 4 o'clock to 7:30, and it's a split shift. And then you've got 6:30 to 8:30, and it varies as you go across the top. Then what you've got is your scope of work. So in your scope of work, you've got whether it's a full clean of toilets, and it tells you clean all fixtures and fittings, replenish consumables, wash floors, damp white walls and doors, empty and reline bins. Now, for some of you, that may not be enough. They may not be sufficient. You may need to want to write more detail. But I hasten to say that I would suspect in most cases, by writing more detail, you're not actually writing it for your cleaning operative, because your operative only wants a simple format. They don't really want a full narrative. So if you're going to use this for your staff, again, there's no harm in using this as a toolbox talk to show them and explain to them what needs to be done and when it needs to be done and how it needs to be done. So the simple format that I put down here is really just as brief as you can get it. So clean all fixtures and fittings. That's it. If you want to then actually expand that and tell them what you want it, how you want it clean, then you can do that. But as I say, that should be a separate thing. Then what you've got there again, you've got washrooms and toilets daytime. So you've got the full clean, which will probably take place before the building is occupied. So that could be done between the hours of 4 and 7:30. And then you've got another full clean, which then again will take place between the hours of 6:30 and 8:30. After that, you've got here washrooms, toilets, daytime. So that is what's expected to be done during the day. So as you can see, check surface, spot wipe, replenish consumables as and when required. Okay, very brief. Again, you can make it as brief and as complex as you want, but make sure it's understandable in terms of the staff's interpretation of it. Now, what we've got there again, the pictogram, and you may want to determine it by doing it some other way, is just a picture. So what we've tended, in this particular case, these pictures are generic. In other cases, what you've actually done is taken pictures of the locations at the client site, because that will then give the operative an opportunity to see where we're talking about, because we have to remember, again, and take into consideration that not everybody is at the same educational level. So they may not be able to read or write all the dialogue that you've got on there, but they'll be able to identify a picture. So what we tended to do, as I said, this is for generic, this is just for your viewing only. However, in another scenario, in your own scenario, it may do you good just to take a picture of your client site. So take a picture of the toilet door, so they're familiar with what you're talking about within that particular location. If you're talking about offices and boardrooms, again, take a picture of a site they're familiar, so they can actually see and they think, oh yeah, I understand that, I know where that is, I can do that, not a problem. Okay, now if we move across in terms of the location, in terms of the middle area, the empty boxes, what goes in them boxes is who will do that particular task. So if you think about the previous slide, what we had is we didn't have the operative's name. So if you said operative 1, 2, 3, if you wanted operative 1 to do the full wash clean, you put in that box operative 1. That's it, nothing else. However, you have to remember, you have to explain to the staff what you want them to do and where you want them to do it. Touching on the far right hand side, which is periodics. Now, periodic tasks for most of us, we understand is it either being a quarterly task or a half yearly task or a yearly task. So in this particular case, if you're going to do a periodic, you may want something a little bit more substantial than what it says as part of a full clean. So part of your periods could be steam cleaning, it could be deep cleaning of tiles, deep cleaning of walls, deep cleaning of your toilets. It may be a special requirement, i.e. to descale toilets once a month or once a quarter, the case may be. So there's various things that you can put in there in terms of the periodics. However, you need to define who is the information for. Is the information so you can have it there so it looks good to the client? Or is it there for an operational manual so the people, your staff can refer to it, your supervisor can refer to it? Can you take me to the next page, Shanti, please? So I can just have a quick glance. Okay, so just to finish off this particular one, I don't want to sort of bore you with the whole thing. I think you get the scenario. So again, so we've got here the scope of work, all communal areas, including receptions, corridors, stairs, If you want to name the actual location in terms of what it's like in the building, then name it. But the key thing is, please remember to put the scope of work that relates to it. If you don't put the scope of work, it's not going to work. Then you've got kitchen, you've got breakout areas, either full clean, or again, if you're doing a spot clean in between a full clean. So it's there for you to use. So are there any questions on that before I move on to the next section?
Yes, we have a question from, number one, we have a question from Arul Murugan, who talks about what is your opinion on measuring the level of cleaning with ATP meter? Do you want to take that up in the COVID infection control session?
Well, I could just touch on it now.
Okay.
My opinion is I don't have any firm opinion one way or the other. The good thing about it is it actually gives you a form of measurement, which is what you need to do. So, you know, when we talk about COVID cleaning, when we talk about any kind of cleaning, you need to have a measurement. So when you're talking about clean, as I said in the previous slide, whether it's acceptable clean or it's unacceptable or it's clean in between, what's your definition? What is your definition of clean? Does it look clean? Is that you happy to do that? Or are you happy to take an ATP reading? Are you happy to do that? Not a problem. However, it doesn't matter what tool you use, provided you're using it properly and you're using it consistently.
You're expecting them to get back to you on this?
No. Did you have another question?
Okay, no. Yeah, I have a question from Rabi. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Rabi asks about cleaning specifications. So he says that, apologies, I'm asking this as we are discussing specifications. So if we are a client and in the process of writing a RFP for cleaning services, other than the contractual clauses, do we include the complete scope of work, or do we need to reflect a minimum requirement and advise the cleaning contractor to add on to those requirements based on their site visits and surveys? I mean, what is the industry best practice in this case?
Oh, blimey, now he's asking. Okay. So as a client, it's a good idea, especially if you're doing what was called an input specification, input specification, sorry. It's a good idea to make sure that you're giving your prospective contractor all the tools that he or she needs. So if you're going to give them a specification, you need to determine what your spec's going to be. So, i.e., if you're saying that all kitchens, what you want them to do, you need to write down exactly what you want them to do, not necessarily the times that you want them to do, because that will be defined later on. That shouldn't really come into effect for costing purposes. What they need for costing purposes is to know what needs to be done and where. And if you've got the frequency in terms of 6 days a week or 5 days a week, then that's fine. The actual times, that comes later on. So there's no hard and fast rule, because it really does depend on the client. I've seen sort of specification, not tender documents that are, you know, they're like War and Peace in terms of its contents, and still says nothing different, something that's shorter. So the one thing that you need to look at when you're doing that, it's great to put in detail as the client, but you need to have an idea of what you want from that in terms of the cost. So, you know, you're throwing it in and you're throwing it out there to the world, and you've got 7, 8, 9 contractors all coming back to you with different prices. How do you know which one's the right price? You've given them the scope of work, what you want them to do. You told them what you want in terms of the spec. They've all come back with a different price. So what do? Do you go with the lowest price because, you know, everybody's on that same range, or do you go for a medium, or do you go for a high? I don't know in terms of doing that. So I think that, yes, my answer to you, Rabi, is give them as much information as you feel necessary for them to give a proper bid and give you a proper price, because what you don't want is them to give you a price for a 1 day a week clean because that's all you've indicated, but actually you indicate that you want a 5 day a week clean. So you just need to really make sure that you're giving them relevant information. Don't over inform. And if there's any questions to be asked, they can always ask you at the tendering stage. I hope that's answered his question.
Rabi, just let us know if this answers your question, or if you have any follow-up questions.
Okay.
Tommy, yeah, it does. He says, yeah, thanks.
He's okay, right? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yes.
So, because I think that not I think I know that it's important for all parties to understand where they are. So, I teach a course on this, on tendering, etc., and it's important that the parameters are clear for when the contractor goes in to make a bid. If the parameters are not clear, you will get vague pricing, you'll get very vague understanding from the contractor, and it will end up in conflict because you as the client, in your head, you're expecting one thing, but actually what's delivered is something completely different to what you wanted. So it's important for you as the client to give out as much information as you can to help the contractor get to a proper tender price that you're happy with, and to make sure that once that's been done, that contractor delivers against what's been priced. So in terms of that, that's about as clear and as much as I can put onto it.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tommy.
Any other questions?
Nothing as of now. We just had these two.
Okay. Can we go to the NH, not the NH, the gov.gov one sheet, please?
The UK COVID rules?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, just hold on.
Okay, so what we got here, so if we go and this all sort of blends into what we're going to talk about in terms of COVID, etc., and maybe you're going to have lots of questions for me, maybe you don't. So I don't hesitate to say I have very mixed feelings in terms of the way that COVID cleaning has been handled in the UK. I think it's been handled in certain cases very, very poorly. There's been some mismanagement in terms of delivery. There's been a lack of understanding in terms of what's required, both from the client side and from the contractor's side. There's been a lot of hysteria in terms of the whole COVID situation, and I'm not making light of it in terms of its effect on every day and every life. However, in cleaning, we have become, in some respects, a bit of a victim because we're being told or asked to do something that we have not really been sure how to deal with. The clients are not sure how it should be dealt with. There's been an awful lot of over cleaning in terms of doing this particular scenario. For those of you that know me, you know my mantra has always been that if something is cleaned, once that surface has been touched, it's now contaminated, it's now dirty. Okay, so to indiscriminately wipe all touch points whenever, as soon as somebody else touches it, it's been recontaminated, maybe not with COVID, but with something else. So I've been very skeptical in terms of doing that. So what I've done here, and I've just taken an extract from the UK government website, which gives us the guidelines on cleaning and disinfectant. And remember, this is not a specification, this is just a guideline. So it says regular cleaning plays a vital role in limiting the transmission of COVID-19. So for those of you that have joined me before, I did mention, and as part of this particular slide, that when you're cleaning or doing COVID cleaning, for instance, it's no one size fits all. Basically, what you should be looking at is a clean with a neutral detergent and then followed up with a form of disinfectant which is approved. Okay, reducing clutter and removing difficult items to clean can make cleaning easier. Well, so if we break that down in terms of where we are, and some of you be able to identify this, it's very difficult for you to have what we call a clear desk policy within certain environments and office environments, etc., etc. So a clear desk policy basically means is that in situations like this, it would have been desirable that the occupant of a desk made sure that his or her desk was cleared at the end of the day so that the whole desk can get wiped over and cleaned as part of a COVID situation. Increase the frequency of clean using standard cleaning products, such as detergents and bleach. Pay attention to all surfaces, but especially ones that are touched frequently, such as door handles, light switches, work surfaces, remote controls, electronic devices. Now, think of your own situation first of all. Let's break this down and look at your domestic situation. How many of you actually take an active role or actually clean your remote control for your TV on a regular basis? How many of you actually clean, although you may be the only person that's using it, how many of you actually clean the keyboards of your laptop on a regular basis? Ask yourself that question. Then times that by the amount of times that your clients are using it, and you can see we've got a problem in terms of potential cross-contamination. However, as I said, there's no one size fits all. You know, you can wipe something down, you're wiping it down, there's moisture in the cloth, you're wiping it down and it dries, people touch the surface, then the whole process starts again. Okay, now it's been said, and I'm not confirming or denying this, it's been said by certain scientists that actually when it comes to COVID, the problem is not about what's on the surface, it's actually what's in the air that's actually creating the problem. Now what they found is that from their research is that there's been very little evidence that anybody has caught COVID from a surface. So if I go back to more extreme, for those of you that understand or have been here on the London Underground, the London Underground, and I can't give you numbers, is extremely busy, especially in peak times. When we had the first COVID breakout and when we had lockdown back in March of last year, the London Underground became a bit of a ghost town. Hardly anybody was out because nobody went to work, so nothing was done. However, there was still regular cleaning going on. Touch points were being cleaned at a regular basis, handles, etc., on trains were being cleaned. The back end of last year, they took a study, and although there were more people using trains, they actually found that there was little to no trace of any form of COVID on handles or anything else on trains. So what they were basically saying, and what has been said by the scientists before, that a lot of problems with COVID is actually in the air. It's not on the surfaces that you and I are cleaning every day. Okay, so if you take that one into consideration. So the next paragraph says, as a minimum, frequently touch surfaces such as wipe down twice a day. Why twice a day, I don't know. And one of these should be at the beginning and the end of the working day. So what are they saying? Bacteria turns up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then doesn't resurface till 5? Well, that's not been the case. For most of you, as you know, you've been in the process of doing fogging, steam cleaning, just general COVID cleaning, etc. That was never ever going to be a once a day task in terms of what it's done, or even twice a day. So again, in terms of, and I could be critical of the British government here, in terms of the information they're putting out, the information is inadequate from my point of view, as a cleaning professional. So cleaning should be more frequently dependent on the number of people using the space. Again, we're all going through a process. We don't know how many people are using a particular space because we don't know how many people are going to turn up for work, etc. So that's, again, is very arbitrary in terms of what we do. Whether they are entering existing or setting an access to hand washing and hand sanitizing facilities. Again, so we went through, and I guess you did the same, we went through a phase where people literally walk around with hand sanitizer in their pockets and just using them frequently when they touch the surface, etc. Some people are using them incorrectly. Some people are using them as a form of hand wash rather than washing their hands with soap and water and then applying. So there was lots of situations there. Some of our cleaning operatives were using hand sanitizer and putting their gloves on, which is totally wrong. Because if your hands are protected by your gloves anyway, why do you need hand sanitizer? And again, in years to come, we're going to probably find that there's going to be a prevalence of occupational dermatitis where people have been wearing gloves for hours on end and not taking them off, or they've been wearing them and putting sanitizer on, etc. So going down, it says, when cleaning surfaces, it is not necessary to wear personal protective equipment. Well, we all know that for most of us in the cleaning industry, actually has been quite the opposite. We've insisted that our staff wear PPE. We've insisted that our staff wear face masks in certain situations, and in certain situations, our client has insisted that our staff wear face masks and personal protective equipment. So, as I said, this is only a recommendation in terms of government guidelines here in the UK. Now, again, I'm not giving you the definitive answer. There are right ways and wrong ways, and we've discussed this in some of the previous sessions. So, I say COVID clean for me should be a 2-stage clean. Neutral detergent, then a prescribed disinfectant or sanitizer to follow up afterwards. Going back to one of my colleagues who talked about ATP reading. Now, if we're cleaning a surface and we're cleaning it for COVID clean, again, how do we know that surface is clean? Well, ATP is one way of doing it. Swab testing is another way of doing it. The naked eye is not a way of doing it. It never will and never has been. Because remember, when we're cleaning, it's not what we can see that's the problem, it's what we can't see. Okay? And we can't see viruses on surfaces. We can't see bacteria on surfaces with the naked eye. So how do we know? So there has to be a method. So going back to my colleague, an ATP reader is probably the right way to go. If there's other forms of reading bacteria count on surfaces, maybe do that as well. Okay? Now, we've known, as I said to you before, there's been hysteria in terms of what needs to be done, what can't be done in terms of cleaning. Do we do fogging? Do we do steam cleaning? Now, what you have to remember is that no one size fits all. You have to do what you feel is right for you. So if I give you an example here in the UK, as I said, we went completely mad during sort of March and maybe September of last year, where if it didn't move, it got wiped down. If it didn't move, it got disinfected or it got bleached or whatever the case may be. Even in buildings where it wasn't being occupied. Now, the scientists have said that if you get COVID or anything of that nature on the surface, it's only going to last for 72 hours. So why do you need to deep clean a building once a month or once a quarter for something where nobody's touched or used? There's no rationale behind it. There's an element of paranoia in terms of what's being done. And a lot of the time, the paranoia has been driven by our clients because of their lack of understanding of what should be cleaned and how it should be cleaned. Now, you as cleaning contractors, and I don't want anybody to answer in the positive here, you took advantage, which was great, because you saw there was an opening to make money. A lot of you were professional enough to do it in the right way and still make money. There was a lot of people out there who were very unprofessional and still made money, but nobody measured the consequences. Nobody took measurements to see if it was done correctly. Nobody took swab tests to see. In the NHS, slightly different. They've got a different protocol in terms of doing it, but in terms of the day-to-day clean, it was never done. Now, for me personally, the pinnacle should be our NHS, our health service. What they do, we adopt in our domestic, or if we do that in our daily office cleaning, then we can't go far wrong in terms of what we're doing. The only thing that differs that I would sort of not agree with is that in the NHS they use a lot of bleach, a lot of chlorine. Don't really want to be doing that in a domestic or in a daily office cleaning scenario. So that's all that I can say on that particular scenario. Shanti, if you can bring up that slide for me, please.
The PPT one?
Yeah, the last one, the infection control.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Hold on 1 second. Here you go.
Okay. So I've outlined there really some of the protocols that we'll be looking for within doing COVID clean. And I know that we're a year down the road. I know that some of you have been involved in it very heavily, and it's not a criticism. I'm not examining what you do or what you don't do. I'm really speaking to people that are not familiar in terms of where we are. What we have to remember is that some 20 years ago or so, we had SARS. SARS wasn't treated with, we didn't have to treat SARS in the same way as we treated COVID-19. So if we're now looking at maybe another 20-year cycle, then we're probably looking at something else. And then, you know, we're going to have to be looking at cleaning services in a completely different way because of a different virus or something that's going to come out. Okay, so do your staff understand what COVID-19 is? Now, some people understand, some people are very familiar, some people understand too much because they read from Google, etc., etc., etc. But do they understand? Do they understand what the virus is? Do they understand how long it lasts? For those of you that read the news, they know that we've got a problem here in the UK, especially amongst black and ethnic minorities who don't want to take the COVID jab, which again in itself presents its own problem in the workplace. So do they understand? And there's a lack of understanding in terms of what it does, what its effects are in terms of the clean environment. I'm not talking about personally, but the clean environment, what effects it's going to have. One of the things the question I'm going to pose to you, and it may not happen in your region, so ignore the question. What do you do? What is your protocol if in this time next year you have a workforce of 10 people and only 9 people have had the vaccine? What do you do with the other 1? Can you force them to take it? Do you sack them because they're not taking it? There's various things. People are not taking it on religious grounds. Some people are not taking it on conspiracy grounds, etc. So how have you made your staff aware? Do your staff understand what it's all about? Do your staff understand what it's about to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine? And again, I'm not advocating that anybody has to do anything in particular. I'm just throwing it out there as a question, because these are the things that you need to look about. How do you deal with it? Have you got family members that don't want to take it for a particular reason? Now, if you can then think, well, that family member's doing it, well, why? Some of my staff may feel the same way. So how does COVID-19 affect them and the surroundings? Well, it affects them, of course it does, because we're cleaning. That's what we do. And I've seen the pictures of people going in and doing misting, etc., full body suits, like it's radiation treatment. When we know, and for most of us, that viruses, bacteria don't jump off surfaces. A lot of it is in the air. So by doing some of what we're doing, we're actually sort of throwing this virus around us in the air, especially in aircon situation if the aircon's not clean. So we need to look at our surroundings. What happens in them surroundings? Have we got the right things in place for when our staff eventually come back to work, when the occupiers, the buildings actually come back? How are we dealing with it in a proper manner? Are we sanitizing the hell out of places? Are we putting too much disinfectant on surfaces? Remember, we could have a situation where we're over disinfecting, because if it's not done properly, properly, the virus will, and the bacteria spores will grow on that chemical, and it becomes ineffective. So in essence, we're going to have a situation where we're over disinfecting. So how do you audit the outcome? And I think I've touched on this already in terms of doing swab testing. If you're going to do ATP reading, and that's also fine, but there has to be some form of measurement. You cannot measure with a naked eye. It's just not the right way to go around things. Even in the old days, it's not the way to go around things, but more so now. You need to be giving your clients confidence that you've actually done the right thing. So if you're going to do an ATP read, and you're going to set it up for an ATP read, please make sure you set it up properly. So first of all, take a reading before the surface has been cleaned. Okay, take a reading in between cleans. Take a reading at the end of the working day. Then what you should then do is get an average of where it should be. Okay, so don't just take one reading and think that's okay. So take 3 readings to start with, get an average, see where you are, see what it's like when it's allegedly clean, then see what it's like in between cleans where the surface has been used or the air's settled, and then take a reading at the end when the room has been used, again when there's been generation, especially in aircon situations. Then you'll get a firm reading. Now if your scale on your, just for argument's sake, if at the end of the day your scale's on 100 but you started off at the beginning of the day on 10, then do your clean again and see what the reading is. If the reading comes back down to 10, then you know you found your level. Okay, but if you take in one reading, it's not going to work. You need to take at least 3 to start with to get an average, so you can see where you are in terms of that scale. And again, I don't hold all the answers in terms of what you should use, what you shouldn't use to measure. ATP readers are a good way to start. Swab testing is also a good way to start. There may be other methods out there that you may want to use. Okay. Are there any questions related to this particular scenario? Because I know that we could all talk about this all day. You've probably got lots of questions in terms of what you've done or not done, or what you'd like to do in the future. If I can answer any of your questions, I will. So let's give the last 10 minutes to just touching on this particular point, if there's anything you'd like to ask.
Thank you, Tommy. Very insightful as usual. Guys, if you all have any questions regarding COVID protocols, COVID cleaning, disinfection, I think we've pretty much touched upon, the basics of it as to what is disinfection and things like that. But if you all have any other further questions, please put them up here. In the meanwhile, Tommy, Andrea says, she just comments that, they have to pay for a weekly PCT test to show the client that they are COVID free. So that is probably one of the requirements that cleaning contractors have to undertake.
Yeah. And we've had, not necessarily here because there's not a lot of locations that are open at the moment, and there's a debate going on at the moment in terms of how far can the government, we're not even talking about companies, but how far can the government take this? So we've got some companies who are dealing with the general public who are saying any new staff that start with us have to have a COVID test before they start. Now, it's a little bit more vague in terms of what you say to an existing member of staff who doesn't want to take the vaccine, because people are saying it's an infringement of their human rights. People are not taking it because of their religious background. So there's lots of variables in terms of doing that. So yes, that's being done, and it's a bit like going to your doctor's surgery, or when I went to have my jab the other day, the first thing they done was took my temperature. And sure, if my temperature was too high, then I won't be able to have it. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah, people who have high BP as well, I think, are not given the vaccination.
Yeah.
Till their blood pressure comes down. So we have a question from Michael, who just asks about, what is the use of air test? Sorry, is the use of air test meters better than ATP?
Well, air test meters, basically it does what it says, Michael, and I think that it has its place in the workplace. The problem that we've got is that the air test in general is not really measuring the standard level of cleaning. What it's measuring is obviously the air quality, and that's a completely different story in terms of air filtration, etc., etc. When we're using when we're sort of measuring surfaces, what we're getting is really a guide on whether something is clean or not clean, to be perfectly frank. So the air quality does make a difference. I'm not an authority to talk about micros in the air, etc., etc., but it does make a difference. But that should not be the defining role of a cleaning company.
Okay, thanks, Tommy. We don't have very many questions. Okay, Michael asks, why I ask is because you've mentioned that the virus travels through air.
Yeah.
So but I guess you answered that as well. But yeah, a lot of conversation on indoor air quality right now when it comes to the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, I mean, you in terms of where you guys are, in terms of locations you are, we have buildings here that are have climate control, etc., etc. There's lots of buildings that don't have climate control, don't have aircon and that kind of nature. Now, I don't know, and maybe my colleague who I mentioned at the beginning, Joe, he could tell you because he's an air quality specialist. When it comes to air quality, there's various things that they're saying can be done in terms of the filtration. You look at the filtration unit, the recycling of air, etc. Now, yes, it affects us as cleaning operatives because we're in that building. Of course it does. And it also, we affect it by what we put in the air. So i.e. if we're using aerosols, if we're using spray canisters, there's an element of what we got goes up in the air. So, you know, we have got a responsibility in terms of doing that. In terms of the measurement of it, I don't know. The indoor air quality, that's not my bag. And I wouldn't want to take that on and give the wrong answer. But when it comes to measuring surfaces, look at, you need to think about what it is. Now, as I said to you, post February 2020, you know, we were doing an audit and we were saying, oh, it's clean and it's not clean because we were looking at it. Now we can't do that. What we need to be able to do now is say, yes, it's clean on the surface, and we've taken a swab test, we've taken an ATP reading, and this is a reading, and you know, we can then show our clients what we've actually done. If you can't do that, then it's hard for you to actually say that the surface is as clean as you can possibly get it.
Thanks, Tommy. So Ronaldo Sonoy asked a question a couple of minutes ago about if you can send us the link that you mentioned, basically that there is this UK scientist who had a study says that says that COVID transmits more in the air than surface to surface contact. So he's asking if you have any sort of reference link.
No, I don't. I can get that from Joe. I can get that from him, and I can come back to you. I'll give you the link.
Okay. We'll send across the link, Ronaldo, once we have it from Tommy, who will get it from Joe, but we don't have it right now. Rabi has a question on manpower, Tommy. He says, back to contracts. How do we establish manpower requirement for a facility? Currently, we somehow use analogous parametric approach, and also there are some big industry averages or productivity tables. But if you can assist on any other strategies or methods on estimation of manpower, please.
Ooh. Okay.
He always asks he gives us the curveballs, as they say, I think.
Okay, so yeah, Rabi's right. So productivity rates are a key part, or should be a key function in terms of tendering for a contract and getting an outcome. There is, and I haven't got it here, and if Rabi allows me to find out for him, I think 2 weeks ago, I was party to a piece of equipment where I'm not sure if it's sound waves, but it actually can read the density of furniture within a room, which would then give you a productivity rate. I can't remember the name of the company while I do it, but if Rabi gives me an opportunity, I'll send you the link and you can pass to him later.
Sure.
But in terms of his question, in terms of what he's asking me, productivity rates do play a part. Now, again, if the client has an understanding of what he or she wants in terms of productivity rate and the output, then that's fine. That will give them an idea in terms of cost. But for some contractors, they don't use it. Some contractors do. But it will give an understanding to the client of how somebody's achieved that particular price. So your client may ask you and say, well, you've got 10 people cleaning this particular location. Why have you got 10 people? How many, how much output from that cleaner are we going to get within a certain space of time? You have to have the answers. But if you're not able to do that based on the fact that you haven't measured the location, you haven't measured the density of the furniture, or you've not measured the traffic area, then it's going to be very hard for you to give an answer. Now, there's no hard and fast answer to this one. To be perfectly honest with you, you get productivity rates or time and motion rates all over the place in terms of what's done. There is no hard and fast rule. If you're going to use it, then you need to adopt one method and stick with that method until obviously that's exhausted. You want to try something else. But what you will find is there are slight variations in terms of how many man hours it will take to clean a particular location based on who has developed the actual equipment or the measurements that deal with it. but there's no hard and fast, because we have to remember again, cleaning is very subjective. So if you've got a desk, for instance, that desk, you may have 10 desks of one size and 10 desks of another size, then it's clearly going to take you longer to clean the larger area. However, there's the, you know, in terms of productivity rates, it's not really always that well defined.
Great. Thanks, Tommy.
I'll
think
write that down. I'll give you a link later.
Sure. Rabi says exactly, and he says thank you.
So you knew the answer already.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, we have come to the end of the session. If y'all have any questions, this is the time. I'm giving y'all maybe half a minute to put it in. Otherwise, we're going to end the session. Tommy, any parting words before I make the conclusion?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody who's participated, who's turned up. For whatever reason you've joined in. I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to say thank you and hello to those participants that I knew before the session, and welcome and glad to interact with you. I'd like to say thank you to you, Shanti, and your organisation for giving me the opportunity to do this. I must admit, when you first asked me, I was slightly apprehensive in terms of what was expected and how I was going to do it. But I love the discussion. I love to be able to impart knowledge. I love to learn from what other people do. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have taken part in this forum. And I hope I'm invited to do another one.
Thank you so much, Tommy. A couple of questions people have. Number one, Rabi asks, when is Tommy visiting Saudi Arabia after the COVID blockade?
It'll have to be a long time after that, because we have certain restrictions on travel in terms of outgoing and coming back. So it'd be a long time, but you know, Rabi can contact me in the usual means. Most people contact me by LinkedIn, not a problem, and just keep in contact.
Yes. And Tommy asks when we will have the next seminar. So we're going to be working on that. Sorry, Michael asks. I'm sorry. Michael asks when we will have the next seminar, and we're going to be working on that. I'm just going to make my parting speech, if we can call it that. So thank you, everybody. We come to the end of the Back to Basics workshop, where we focused on the fundamentals of cleaning and soft FM. I'm sure you all will agree that the sessions were super informative and gave us a lot of food for thought. I can't believe, Tommy, that something we started sometime in October last year has now come to an end. It's been quite a long time, you know, since we've been planning this, and I'm really glad to see how it has, come about. Like you said, you know, even I was a little apprehensive about the kind of responses we would get, but you guys have done an exemplary job in terms of, sending us, interacting with us, asking us questions. So stay tuned. There's a lot more that we're planning for this year. In the meanwhile, I'd quickly like to thank our sponsor, Reza Hygiene, for being associated with this wonderful workshop and being so supportive. And special thanks to Tommy, who has been so thorough and patient in all of these sessions and has left us with lots to think about. And finally, to the audience who have listened in every session and interacted with the same enthusiasm, if not more. Thank you, everybody, and have a very, very good evening.
Thank you. Take care, Shanti. I'll talk to you soon.
Sure, Tommy. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.